right, we should be good.
All right. I call the meeting to order of the State Climate Mitigation and Adaptation Commission. This is July 16th, and this is a special meeting. We have a very important discussion on this meeting, and I want to thank those who are able to come in person and those who are able to join us on Zoom. But we'll go ahead and get started with some announcements, an announcement and a roll call. We'll do the roll call first. So Chair Chang?
Aye.
Representative for Senator Gabbard?
I'm here.
Yes,
Meg,
there.
I'm on Zoom.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a representative from the Senate? No, excused. Chair Lowen?
Here.
Good to see you. Thank you for
Okay.
being here.
Is there a representative for Representative Hashem?
He's actually in the Teams. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, everyone, with the confusion. So he will be joining shortly. as soon as he-
Okay,
Great.
all right. Then do we have a representative for the Hawaii Tourism Authority? Do I see Lindsay?
I don't think
No.
so.
Excused. And do we have a representative for the Department of Agriculture?
Present, yes.
Terrific. Okay. Do we have a representative for the CEO of OHA?
No.
Excused. And do we have a representative for DHHL?
We do.
Nancy. Okay. And for Department of Transportation?
Aloha, everyone. Laura Ka'akua here for HDOT. Sorry I can't be there in person.
Thank you. For, let's see, where are we? For Department of Health.
Hi, Diana Felton here for Director Fink.
Thank you. For the Department of Education.
No.
No. For the City and County of Honolulu.
It's Sullivan here for Director Akakuchi.
Thank you, Pat. For the County of Maui, I see Kate there.
Kate Blystone here for myself, and I apologize that I'm not there in person. I had hoped to be there, but I have to be in Lahaina tonight, so it wasn't going to work. But I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. For the County of Maui.
We just
Oh,
did
that's
county.
Kate.
That's Kate.
Excuse me, County of Hawaii. Hawaii
Aloha,
County.
Laura Ocasio, present for County of Hawaii, Jeff Darrow, Director of Planning, and also apologize for not being there in person. Mahalo.
Thank you, Laura. For the County of Kauai.
I thought they'd be here.
Excused. For the Adjutant General. Excused. And for the Coastal Zone Management Manager.
Chris Liu here for myself.
And for the Director of DBED.
Monique Sanfis here for the Director of DBED, Director Tokioka. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. Okay, moving to announcements. Laura Ka'akua has an announcement for us. Go ahead, Laura.
Aloha, everyone. Hawaii Department of Transportation has published our draft energy security and waste reduction plan, and we would really appreciate feedback from all the counties, sister agencies at the state level. And the plan is a little bit different in scope. We hope to present at a future meeting to you all. No, we did a kind of initial talk before, but the plan actually lists partnerships and different roles for agencies and private industry to contribute to our strategies for emissions reduction. So we're hoping that counties and agencies may be willing to write themselves in as taking on a particular kuleana to further those strategies. And I believe commission staff will be putting the link in chat. Thank you so much for that. So the draft plan and public comment form are there. And we're also just willing to take feedback in whatever form is easiest for agencies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. That's great. So we'll move on to approving the meeting minutes. Members, have you had an opportunity to review the minutes? Members, are there any comments or corrections?
We did have some comments and corrections, non-substantive from DHHL, our ever proofreader, Nancy, which have been incorporated.
Okay, members of the public, any comments on the draft minutes as corrected? Hearing none, we will accept the minutes as corrected and move on to our next item on the agenda. And that is this is our, my co-chair and I are very interested in hearing from the members on a discussion on the functions of the Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission. This is the 10-year anniversary of the Climate Change Commission. 10 years has been a long time and a lot of work and a lot of progress. But it's time to take another look and see where we are now and where the members want to go with this. How can this commission be useful to the residents of the state of Hawaii and the state departments and the legislature and the counties? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Dawn Chang, to also express her hopes for this discussion.
No, so thank you very much, Mary Alice, and I greatly appreciate having as full of a house as we've had in a very long time, and I appreciate Rep. Lowen coming in person too. Thank you so much. So I think this has been a discussion that Mary Alice and I have had for some time about revisiting the Climate Commission, CCMAC, looking at the accomplishments over the last 10 years, looking at where we are today, and then looking forward, because there have been some changes. I mean, I think last year in particular, we had the governor's CAT, Climate Action team that came together. They made some critical recommendations, which I believe was very instrumental in leading to the Green Fee Bill, which is a dedicated source of funding to address climate action issues, many of which were identified in the CAT report. So I think both Mary Alice and I have discussed, because probably over the last several months, our meetings have not been, we haven't had a lot of participation, and for numerous reasons. I mean, everybody is busy. We were in the midst of legislative session, but we are all plagued with numerous meetings. So I want to make sure that our use of your time is beneficial to you and your constituents or the agencies that you serve. So our intention today is really to have an open discussion of all the members as to, what do you believe were some of the major accomplishments of CCMAC over the last 10 years? How do you feel about where we are today? And one of the hard questions that we were going to ask is, should we continue on? Because there are many other, we are particularly, I know I am particularly pleased with how the counties have embraced and integrated and incorporated. And I look at DOT, and I'm really excited to see all the good things that DOT is doing. So I think a lot of the different state agencies and counties are incorporating climate action, both adaptation, mitigation in your own planning processes, which I think that was always the goal. So, at the end of our discussion, no decisions were made. This isn't an action item. It's for discussion, but really looking at getting an assessment from everyone. How do we move forward, or do we move forward? If so, how do we move forward? So when I look back at the establishment of HRS 225P3, it established this, the Climate Commission. It was a shared leadership between DLNR and Office of Planning and the membership. I mean, when you look at who are the members, I mean, we have decision makers, we have people who are implementing, we have the right people in the room. So are we moving a lot of these hard questions forward? So with that kind of being said, I also looked at what were some of the major accomplishments that all of you, over the last 10 years. And for me, there are some really significant ones. Like I see the launch of the Sea Level Rise Vulnerability and Adaptation Report. I think that was critical to coming up with the SLRX. I see also many of the mapping, the coordination that we've had on looking at vulnerable areas. There's been mitigation measures. In particular, I think about TOT that I think they would have implemented many of the things that came out in the Navahini lawsuit. But DOT is embracing a lot, and the announcement of today, I think, is also critical to the way that government agencies are implementing. And there's been a lot of tools that we've used for, again, integrating between county plans and permitting. I know that Leah and her team have been doing a lot of community engagement with the assistance of the AmeriCorps people, but we've been doing things on a very shoestring budget, kind of mostly through grants. So with that kind of foundation, I really would like to leave it open to everybody to participate. I know that the counties, and maybe I'm going to look at, Ben, if maybe, because there was a discussion, I think the counties had, all of the county planning directors met. And if you'd be willing to kind of share some of your discussion.
I would be happy to. Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you.
So the counties did have a meeting a couple of weeks ago. I believe it was at the very beginning of July. And we had representation from all 4 counties. And we asked this question, which thankfully your coordinator Leah posed to us, which is what is the purpose of the commission? Is it appropriate to revisit it? I think first I want to say thank you for asking the question, because it really offers up 2 opportunities, 2 paths. One is we all save several hours in our life, which is hugely welcome. And 2 is that we look at how to become more productive as a group, which is also very welcome. I think that the feedback from the group, and I'll defer to some of my colleagues online. I'll go through this briefly, but ask them to really underline the things that were most important to them, perhaps. But there was a sense from the counties that a greater focus on adaptation over mitigation would be beneficial, based on the fact that these are planning directors primarily, and that's more their kuleana than the energy issues, and that felt more pertinent to them. So that was an ask, and something that they feel that there's still a lot of value in doing. We all shared an acknowledgement that the green fee really opens up a very significant opportunity for all of us. And perhaps this could be a body that takes on some responsibility, either formally or informally, to advocate for the type of projects that would be most beneficial to the state in regards to the fee. One of the things that all of us, I think, at the counties really appreciated was this idea that perhaps there could be an opportunity within that fee to expand partnership between state and counties through some sort of matching mechanism. So if we were to say the counties propose a project and we could get the state to buy into it and see there being some sort of match on funding, there's nothing like funding to bring partners together. So that was another thing that really resonated with folks. Another item that quite in particular, but I think everyone really spoke to, was helping to solve shared data gaps. And I think we've all seen the great work that Chip Fletcher's office and UH has done with regards to data gaps, especially around coastal erosion. And so that was something that, bridging from information and understanding to regulation is a huge jump in terms of the requirements for data. And I think that was something that we all have a common need for, and something that we felt could still be a very important function of this group, and something that does require discussion and collaboration so that it doesn't just come out from one entity and not serve the purposes of all. We certainly don't want to have different data sources for these things. Legislative priorities, obviously, with the makeup of this group. And I'm looking at Rep. Lowen in particular, but there are several representatives from House and Senate that really serve well in this capacity and help to consider legislative priorities that really, I think, are becoming more urgent. So maybe just to round it out, the sense from the group is that these issues are becoming more important as time goes by, and they are changing, they are getting different. And we as the members, I think, perhaps have a greater obligation to come to you all to drive the agenda as opposed to just showing up and having you feel like, hey, what are you here for? And I think there's a lot of interest in doing that. And it's just a question of what are the practices we have to implement to help? Because I can say for myself that Leah has been a huge champion and just constantly reaching out to people saying, hey, what are you thinking about? How can we help? And we need to respond to that. But that was a lot. So I want to really defer to my colleagues online and see if they have additional
Comments.
edification that they can offer.
Kate, can you go first and then followed by Laura?
Mahalo, I appreciate that. And I appreciate Ben for like taking all of the comments that were made during our far-reaching discussion and kind of pulling them all together. For me and my other colleagues because I don't think there are any other planning directors on this right now, but for us, like just putting a finer point on the two biggest things, I think adaptation has to be our priority. So all things associated with adaptation is something that we care about because that affects how we do our work and how we implement. So we very much want to shift, not do a slight shift to more adaptation, but like a hard pivot to adaptation in this group. And like I said, like Ben said, like I think that we want to support that. The other thing is I think this group should be a leader. Another point that Ben made, I think we should be leading the legislative priorities, not responding to legislative actions, right? I want us to walk away with a slate every year that we bring to the legislature instead of folks having to come up with legislative priorities related to climate change. And so I would be happy to be part of an organization that does that work. But the way that we've been set up, that I've taken a back seat because it just didn't feel like it applied to us. And I would be happy to be part of it if it did apply to us. So that's all I'll say. Two priorities: adaptation for us and legislative work. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And again, thanks to Ben for pulling our thoughts together. It was kind of a fast-paced conversation, so like it was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Laura Casio.
Aloha, thank you. No, I kāko'o what both Ben and Kate have mentioned, and am here as one of the newest members to help drive this conversation. And I'm super grateful for all of the insight that was previously mentioned. While I'm not a planning director, we will be working closely together and oftentimes both present. I do know that our lens is from sustainability, climate equity, and resilience, and definitely also would reiterate the need to have really comprehensive and collective advocacy around legislation, especially on, our goals that we're mandated to uphold. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. What?
I just want to recognize that Rep Hashem has joined.
Oh, okay. Welcome, Rep Hashem. Thank you for coming. Appreciate that. So let's see if there are other members that want to chime in. And if I don't get any volunteers, I'm going to start calling on people. Dr. Felton.
Some of you know what I'm going to say already.
Go ahead.
So I think there's some real benefits for us at the Department of Health to have this kind of group meeting with the opportunity to speak with others in different aspects of climate change, to be able to hear what the county planning offices are doing, to be able to hear what DHHL is thinking about, and also to sort of share our manifesto, if you will, about the need to be considering the public health impacts of climate change. And there's not really a lot of other avenues for us to be able to really talk in detail or share some of that information about how the impacts from climate change are going to physically, behavioral, health-wise, harm us, our families, our relatives, our children. So I think there's a real benefit in that opportunity to be able to share the different places where people are coming from around this issue. I definitely agree on adaptation. We do some mitigation work at DOH, and that will continue and is continuing around greenhouse gas inventories and such. But a lot of our climate change work is starting to look at how to prevent the oncoming illness, injury, and disease associated with the changes in our climate. So I think that's an interesting idea. And then, of course, legislatively, we're always working to try to insert the health lens of the different legislative priorities. So I would advocate for ongoing relationships and partnerships that I think are really helpful.
Okay. Nancy, DHHL.
Well, I agree with Diana that, yeah, if this body performs a very important function to get this cross-pollination of ideas and initiatives. We all know that there are a lot of silos in government. We're always trying to overcome those. And as a planning staff member working in a state agency that doesn't yet have a climate adaptation coordinator, I mean, I think every state department should have some kind of position like that. So maybe we can, advocate for that and move toward that. But, it's really helpful when focusing our efforts on, again, policy development, legislative initiatives, budgeting. It's always more effective when your efforts are coordinated and you're all moving in the same direction. And I think there's a lot of power in that. I think that gets the attention of the legislature. But we know that there are a lot of financial constraints. There's a lack of federal funding that we're all going to be feeling. And I'm concerned about the capacity issues because of that for supporting Leah and the small staff that she does have. How can is there a way we could tap into the green fee to help support the efforts of this body to coordinate? So I think quarterly meetings are good. And I think the sea level rise info is really critical. I think getting the information to us about state renewable energy mandates for all state agencies, and also especially sea level rise and state infrastructure. So, but that's also counties, and I'm not leaving out the counties, but, it really helps us focus our efforts. It kind of puts us on task to prepare internally, get ready for these meetings, and kind of try to get our own internal efforts going. It's kind of prods us to keep the pace up. So, which is hard considering our mandate right now is to spend a huge amount of money putting beneficiaries back on the land. So that's been the top priority.
Of course. Thank you, Nancy. So from Department of Agriculture, you're one of our newer members. So do you feel comfortable sharing what Department of Agriculture would like to see this commission help with?
Not at this time.
Not yet?
Not yet.
We'll
Let
adjust.
me ease into it.
Oh, okay, we can do that. Representative Lowen.
I think there's a couple things that come to mind. I haven't had as much time to maybe have these conversations. It sounds like something you've been having for a while, but I would return to look at the enabling statute and kind of think about what is listed there. I understand the need to focus on mitigation, but I think that, it still has to be both to a degree. And that is in the statute. I think the bringing people together to collaborate and communicate is important. What outcome that's led to, you guys can tell me, I guess. It's sort of sometimes hard to tell. And then for some of the other work that's ongoing, I guess the question would be, what is the commission needed for versus what is duplicative with stuff that's already happening in other agencies, especially as we move forward from, 10 years ago and 10 years before that. A lot of this climate work has been integrated more directly in every agency at a at a more basic level, so that it's not this external thing you're kind of trying to patch on or patch together as much as it used to be. And then maybe it would be useful to think about, I know the funding has been an issue for a few years, but maybe it would be useful to think about if the funding was available, what projects would that lead to? That you could make the case that the commission could do better than someone else. And the green fee, I think we should just think about, regardless of where the funding comes from, what would it look like if the funding was at a level that you guys felt like would make this a more functional group or have the intended outcomes. As far as what the green fee will be spent on, it's like every meeting that I go to since people have their eyes on that pool of funding for something, so
It's already been spent 10 times over. Yes.
We'll just have to see what happens, but I mean, I think the bigger question is just what, if you had the funding, what would you picture that being used for? And then the legislative aspect is, I mean, it's useful to a degree. I think sometimes it's helpful to have that support coming from, a group that this whole group has signed off on, I think. I mean, I think that would probably do a lot of the work at the legislature, meeting with people and generating the, coming up with the policies we think have possibility of moving forward.
Absolutely, as listed in the legislation that has been passed over the last 25 years. It's an amazing accomplishment. And I want to thank you, especially as the chair of the Environmental Committee on the House side, for all of these laws that primarily do address mitigation, because that was the first charge. But, Hawaii is way ahead of almost every state in the nation because of the legislature's extremely commitment to protecting both Hawaii and the
And
planet.
I would say too, on the legislative front, I mean, probably part of the reason that we focused on mitigation somewhat at the legislature, it might seem that way, is because a lot of the adaptation stuff sort of falls to county jurisdiction, if you're talking about planning and things like that. And so it's a little more challenging for us to write bills for that. But I don't think it's outside of the scope of this commission to think about suggesting legislation at the county level as well, if that's what's needed on a legislative level to move goals forward.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Representative Hashem, are you, can we call on you to say how you think this commission might be helpful over the next 10 years?
I'm here just to listen, basically, to get up to speed on what you guys are doing. And
we'll give you a free pass for now. Thank you anyway for coming. I appreciate that very much. Meg Turner for Senator Gabbard.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Mary Alice and everyone. I'm here on Zoom. And firstly, want to say that Senator is sorry that he couldn't be here today. He had meetings in his district, but he asked me to share these comments on his behalf. And can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And the first thing is he'd like to mahalo Leah and all the members of the commission for all you do to help keep Paradise Paradise. And as you know, Leah and Ms. Chang, we also every year reach out to CCMAC and all of our stakeholders around October usually, and request your legislative priorities. And I'm really glad everyone's mentioned legislation, because I mean, that's what we do. So the senator would love to work more closely with you folks in introducing legislation that to move the goals of the commission forward, coming up with strategies for decreasing greenhouse gases, sea level rise, etc. And he would also like to see CCMAC help when it comes time to testify, to rally the troops, and really, because we're kind of like a very small office, and we have to deal with so many bills, and we find that the testimony that comes in really does help. but we don't always have time to reach out and say, hey, don't forget to submit testimony. So that would be really a helpful function, I think. And then, you know, just getting the general public involved and helping to get the bills passed. So thank you. That's all
Thank
I-
you, Meg. So let's see, we have for the DBED director, Monique, you have comments on how this commission can be helpful over the next 10 years or going
Sure.
forward?
Well, speaking as a state agency that does more mitigation work, you know, there is of course some resiliency that, you know, the electric sector, of course, has to deal with. You can't totally separate it. I would stress that planning and permitting is actually a very core part of our energy transition, but I would agree in the folks that are represented in the CCMAC tend to be, you know, the more adaptation folk. So it's almost like you don't want to like grow the working group bigger than it is, but I think there's probably some key members needed for the mitigation side, and I don't know if, you know, it's necessary to or productive to include them. So I think it would be okay to switch the focus to adaptation, but, you know, as speaking from HSEO's perspective, not necessarily DBED's, you know, dismissing the folks that are more on the mitigation side, so we're not, you know, overutilizing time, precious time, would be appropriate, or just really, you know, setting meeting expectations. If you're having a meeting and the focus is on sea level rise adaptation, not necessarily having the requirement for mitigation focused agencies, or making sure that the mitigation focused agencies have delegates that have resilience sort of component. So I think there has been, I'm glad it was brought up, probably this divide between adaptation and mitigation and how to prioritize the two. I think that does need to be worked out. How we work it out, I don't know. I don't really have the answers to that, but I think reprioritizing, and if the priority is adaptation, so be it. But I just want to stress that we need planning and permitting for mitigation efforts as well.
Thank you, Monique. Sounds like a partnership. And Chris Liu, our Coastal Zone Management Manager for the state.
Yeah, I am the only one that doesn't have a designee, so I haven't been able to attend all the meetings here in the less than year that I've been here. So I would say from what I've seen so far, I would agree with Nancy that, you know, a quarterly meeting might make the most sense, given I'm in a lot of meetings with a lot of the folks in this room on other groups. So to kind of avoid overlap in those scenarios. I also think that having a shared approach as far as legislative testimony would be helpful, or if, you know, the commission staff can prepare proposals is what they think. We might want to be sharing with the legislators. That would be helpful to some of us that don't have legislative coordinators or folks that can really dive into what's going on. So that would just free up some of our time as well. But yeah, I just want to echo all of the information that the county shared as far as adaptation goes, and whatever is best for everyone works for me.
I like that. Okay. Have I missed any member
Laura?
of the commission?
Laura.
Laura, go ahead, Laura. Turn your camera on.
Hi, everyone. Sorry,
There
just
you
a
go.
second. Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate the discussion as well. For Hawaii Department of Transportation adaptation, for our coastal highways, our airports, our harbors, it's always front and center. And now with our focus also on mitigation, and our energy security plan. I can see great value in keeping both of the focuses for the commission. I guess I would caution against like totally getting rid of mitigation, because there will inevitably be a need for us to come together as the legislature, state and county agencies to focus on a mitigation issue. But I would support if the direction is that if our meetings would be more fruitful to just focus in on adaptation. I would support that. Maybe it's like we decide what the focus is for the year. That it sounds like a good plan. And yeah, I like the idea of figuring out together like one or two legislative proposals that we could all support. I think that would be good, and getting that as early as possible so that we could make sure that leadership, even if it may not really affect that particular department or may not be front and center for that particular department, if it's a priority for the commission, I think there'll be support from leadership of all the partner agencies to support a particular piece of legislation. So I like that idea as well. I can see, I guess, just thinking about our energy security plan, like something that comes to mind as a need is coordination, which it's already happening, but I think even more so as we get closer to the milestones to hit, coordination with our state and county fleet transition to electric vehicles or cleaner fuels for medium and heavy duty vehicles and equipment. I think the commission can play and has played in the past a good role in kind of keeping us all accountable to those set milestones and having check-ins. But, maybe on the mitigation side, it's, I don't know, a committee or something less frequent. So, and I also support the quarterly meeting schedule. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Laura. Have I missed any other members? If not, I'll go to comments from the general public. Is there anyone first in the room that would like to offer some ideas on this topic, this agenda item? No, seeing none. Anyone on Zoom who wants to offer their thoughts? Okay. Do I hear somebody?
I think there's just a cough
No.
outside.
I think I heard somebody's dog. Good job. Okay. The co-chairs will take all of these thoughts into account, and we'll try to come out with some ideas for our next quarterly meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I am, I think we are open to hearing if there's anything else you want to add. I am somewhat challenged, I shouldn't say challenged, but I think this is really good conversation, because what I heard is an affirmation. Yes, there's a role for CCMAC to play, whether it's coordination, whether it's finding, looking at sort of, there's a place for both adaptation and mitigation. I know at DLNR, we have a lot of our, because we're trying to move in the area of INA-based management. So a lot of our communities that are rural communities, Native Hawaiian communities, so a lot of disparities in access to resources. So for us, adaptation is really critical. We are finding ourselves working a lot more with the counties too on that. So if we can find, so I think, as Mary Alice said, we're going to do more, some hard discussion. We may follow up. I think the counties have ongoing meetings that you are having, and we may use you as sounding boards. But again, we welcome if there's anything else you want to add that you haven't said. I see Chris's hand is up too, so we can take Chris's comments. But we really do want to hear from all of you, because for me, if I'm going to spend my time, I really want this to be relevant. I want it to be helpful. I want it to be something that you walk away saying, hey, that was a pretty good use of my 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I mean, and I know poor Diana, you're sort of always that lone voice talking about health, but I mean, we see this around the globe. I mean, this
Yeah.
is just, and we're seeing more of it. And, you know, I also chair the Drought Commission. It is getting drier. I also chair a Water Commission. There's not enough water to go around to everybody.
Yeah.
So unless we are proactively planning how, you know, projects that are appropriate, that take into consideration these things. So, I mean, I think there's a role for both, you know, planning as well as regulations. There's a role for both mitigation and adaptation. But I do get a sense, everybody here, at least, I haven't heard anybody say, no, we should just disband CCMAC. So we'll put our heads together and then we'll come back. I think we heard from the majority of at least 4 people who spoke said they were in favor of quarterly meetings. So those who speak up, your voices are heard. So, okay, but I see Chris's hand.
Yeah,
is up.
Senator Lee, thank you for raising your hand. And I'm sorry I didn't notice you were on before. Would you like to add, to comment on this discussion of how the commission can be relevant over the next period of time going forward?
Yeah, thanks so much. And apologize for coming in late. We had a bunch of other stuff going on, but and I apologize if I repeat anything that's been said or is, you know, veering
No
off too far. Just stop me. But I did want to put a couple comments out there for consideration as we go forward. You know, when we created the Climate Commission back in the day, the intent was really a legislative-driven directive to try and get the best minds together within our state from all the various departments and agencies and whatnot that have a relevant stake in the future of climate and really decisions that we have to make, not only for ourselves, but for setting Hawaii, you know, on a path to address this for our next generation. Part of that was recognizing that within the legislature, we aren't the experts, we aren't the scientists, we aren't, you know, managing the boots on the ground. And what we really need, kind of building off of the other models at the time in other states that were being formulated, was really 2 things. One was a central place of coordination where all the different departments come together, which I think, you know, we've got a good number of folks who've been participating for years, which has been certainly helpful in getting everybody sort of on the same page. But the bigger thing was, what are the recommendations and how do we execute to actually address all these issues? And that's something that, you know, we specifically built into the statute as part of the mission to really get eyes on the situation from angles that, you know, certainly at least on the legislative side, we can't see, and figure out what are the resources needed, what are the tools needed, what are the policies needed to actually close the gap and address all these things kind of across the board, from impacts to on the mitigation side, or excuse me, on the adaptation side, to, of course, some mitigation, you know, what can we do? And over the course of the subsequent, I don't know, 10 years now or whatever it's been, I think we did this in 2014 originally. You know, there's been a lot of policies put in place, but it's been heavily driven by, I think, the legislature in ways that we keep trying to take bites at the apple, but ultimately, you know, we certainly aren't the be all end all. And I'm sure there's so much more out there, you know, that we're scrambling to figure out. Like, for example, what are we supposed to be doing about the urban heat island effect and what we're seeing there? There's been almost no discussion and certainly no policies or no programs put in place to really, you know, effectively address that. We've started the process, but, you know, in a lot of examples like that, there's so much more we could and should be doing across the various departments and agencies. And so that's something that would love to see actually executed and fleshed out in a way where the commission can come back to the legislature and have, you know, a laundry list of recommendations for here's exactly what we need to do, here's the resources we would need, or things we need to create, or what have you. So anyway, I just want to put that out there because I think there is value there, and clearly we are way behind on execution compared to many other states in this respect, and especially now when the impacts are, you know, really costing people's lives. I don't think we can sit back and wait for something to happen to compel us to do it. So trying to get ahead of the ball, and just appreciate your guys' work on this. And thank you so much for the opportunity to weigh in.
Thank you, Senator. And we absolutely agree with your comments that saving lives is one of the reasons that this commission exists. So any other thoughts, comments from members or the general public? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to.
I'd like to hear Leah too.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, go on.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Back away.
Yeah, okay, yeah, your thoughts, Leah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been just like so much fun and such a great honor to be able to staff the commission. You know, it's definitely seeing it from its original shape when Anu was here and then taking over and seeing the shift in leadership. It definitely seems like we have maybe sputtered and stalled a little bit. And I think it's just so amazing to have everyone in the room here. And I think that makes a huge difference for the energy and the participation. That's so wonderful to hear from folks. Both mahalo to all of you folks for giving me props, but also for all the work that you do whenever I reach out and ask for your input and questions and for participating. You know, we have a lot of great initiatives that we don't always get into here. I just, you know, really want to echo that, you know, it is so important for us to continue this conversation, especially now, especially in this political climate where climate change is getting buried under, you know, a whole lot of pseudoscience, false claims, that Hawaii can continue to be a real leader in this space. I'll talk maybe a little bit later, but I'll get into it now. We had a meeting with the U.S. Climate Alliance this spring in person. And one of the things we were talking about is the real need for leadership in the climate space from America, considering that the federal government is no longer there. And I think Hawaii really stands as a strong leader in the Pacific as well. So I just think it's such a great opportunity to bring folks to the table to have these really difficult discussions sometimes, because there are trade-offs that are going to have to be made. And if we have the opportunity to have everybody in this room having those discussions, it's just going to really benefit us moving forward. And that collaboration is going to be really, really important.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Michael, you stay around for the next one for a second?
And I think Ben wanted to say something.
Oh, Ben, you want to have a comment before we move on?
If it's okay with you, Chair, one comment is, I think it's so obvious that we don't always speak it out loud, but as adaptation forces us to be more efficient and to do better with our limited resources to absorb these impacts, it actually requires just tremendously more collaboration than we've had in the past. And I think this body has a real opportunity to drive some of that collaboration. And I think that Dr. Felton's example of public health, like it takes everybody to work on public health.
Yep.
They can lead us and point us at it, but we all need to be participants. Our office does a little bit of work with Department of Health on heat in particular, as a matter of fact. But there are other areas. We are working on development in Iwilei Kapalama, and we started thinking, how are we going to address our riverine flooding and coastal liabilities with sea level rise? And all of a sudden, HDOT reaches out and said, hey, we're already working with USACE. But it just was happenstance. And I think there's so much importance to us sharing with each other what we're doing so that we can then make those connections. It's just critical. And the last thing I'll say is we have a One Water group that's really targeting exactly that. And I'd love to share more on that as well. But that's right now still internal to the city, but getting ready to blossom more broadly. So thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Chair Evans, can I add one more piece?
Yeah, go ahead,
Just to
Diana.
kind of round that out, especially coming from sort of one particular aspect of all of these issues. We've, you know, in the last few months lost all of our federal support for this kind of work. And that a lot of that had to do with expertise outside of like the health range. So a lot of our knowledge about planning and permitting, a lot of our technical assistance from a lot of these different areas came from CDC and their Climate and Health Office, which is no longer in existence. So we're going to need to lean much more on our state partners. And I think that may go in reverse as well, that, you know, there's going to be less information coming from EPA and CDC about these topics, may need the expertise at DOH or and vice versa to really support each other's work, and especially the places where they overlap, where we may not have the exact expertise.
Good point. Good point. So let's move on before we lose. So our next.
Just gonna take a break. Give me 1 minute too.
Okay. Well, I will do a quick framing of this next item, which is the discussion on the 2027 sea level rise update, which is a requirement of the commission. It is actually our first charge, as Senator Lee and Rep. Lowen recall. And we did fulfill it in 2017 with the help of UH. We then were required to update it every 5 years. We were able to do an update in 2023, Leah?
2022.
2022 with the help of Sea Grant College at UH. And we are now planning for a more robust update for 2027. The framing I want to say is that scientists are now saying, as the planet continues to grow hotter, despite our mitigation efforts, sea level rise will continue for thousands of years. Even if we are able to go to net zero or negative zero on mitigation planet-wide, we are still going to have sea level rise. So as an island state, we have to adapt in addition to mitigation, and we have no choice. And the science that UH can bring to this update will give us some kinds of knowledge about how fast we need to adapt and where we need to adapt. So with that, I'm going to introduce Michael King. What perfect timing, Michael. Who will introduce our presenter. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks. Let's try to skip up my. Okay, so one of the few concrete tasks that were assigned to the sea level rise, or Climate Commission under Act 32 was the preparation of a sea level rise and adaptation report.
Yes.
10 years ago, it was funded. This year, it's time for our update as required. It's not funded. In a minute, I'll introduce Brad Romine and Amy Wirtz, Sea Grant agents who are with my office, OCCL. We've asked Brad to coordinate the process developing the report, not to write it, but I can spare him enough time to coordinate the process. This is a commission report, so we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves without getting, I guess, buy-in from the commission and a green light for us to proceed. We still have a lot of questions we're asking ourselves, and it ties very much in the conversation you all just had. Like, how do we make this effective? Okay, I don't want to do a report that sits on a shelf. We want a report that's useful to these members and that will have a real world impact. And as a heads up, I'm not asking for commitments today.
You can't, because sunshine law wouldn't let you.
Right. But sunshine law allows me to give warnings of
Yes.
It does. Yeah, OCCL does have some funds that we can dedicate to part of this report. And I will be hitting up other members of the commission to contribute in some way, staff time, articles, writing. We don't really know yet.
Yeah.
But the next quarterly meeting should be in October. I'll put it on the agenda. Or I'll ask that it goes on the agenda.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
So now I'd
Michael.
like to turn this over to Brad and Amy.
Yeah. Brad and Amy, if you would walk us through what looks like a very helpful outline proposal for the next the 10-year update.
Okay, happy to.
Come sit here, but bring another chair for Amy.
Yeah.
Amy, you want to come up closer to the table? Here. Pull a chair up. Yeah, we got room.
There you go.
Okay. Aloha, co-chairs, members,
Aloha.
thanks for this time and agenda to talk a little bit about this sea level rise update, expedited reduction. Michael, again, I'm Brad Romine, I'm extension faculty with Hawaii Sea Grant. I'm working with OCCL and the Climate Commission through Leah for since the commission's inception and about 12 or 13 years at Sea Grant now, and I'm a coastal geologist by background, but really dabbled in all things kind of adaptation based since then. Amy, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. Amy Wertz, also a Sea Grant Extension agent with OCCL, working directly in the office for the majority of my time now. I'll also be heavily involved with the 2022 update that we did and looking forward to 2027.
Great.
So with this, we thought we'd just kind of walk you through some of the kind of initial thoughts that we've had and a small hui of us, mostly based at the university, about what this next iteration of the sea level rise report maybe could be. Again, all of this is still open to discussion and kind of evolution and development. But there we have the kind of landmark pieces that came out of the state sea level rise report work so far. Of course, the 2017 state sea level rise report, the first iteration of that, the Hawaii Sea Level Rise Viewer that was released along with that as the companion kind of online atlas. We continue to maintain that viewer. I know many of you use it. Very pleased to hear the examples of the use of that repeatedly. It's still ongoing. We've made updates to that. We will continue to do that to meet various user needs. And then we did an update in 2022 at the 5-year mark for the Sea Level Rise Report, which largely focused on an update to the sea level rise science. What have we learned from the body of research, federal agencies, others over that 5 years since the initial release of the report. And then we also looked at the initial recommendations of 2017 report and what progress had been made there and what do we want to do next? What are the recommendations? We had some other recommendations at that time. Those resources, probably all know this, available through the State Climate Commission website, the Climate Adaptation Portal, also easily found through the State Sea Level Rise Report. There's some links if you scroll down through there. So if anybody's looking for them again after this presentation. Okay, next slide, please. So we thought we'd just take a real brief look at the enabling legislation for the State Climate Commission, but particular to the State Sea Level Rise Report. Back in 2014, then this update through Act 32 in 2017 told the commission that they shall focus on major areas of sea level rise impacts based on the latest scientific research. We spent a lot of time talking about the latest science in both those reports, economic ramifications of sea level rise, and then focusing on recommendations around planning, management, adaptation. So that's been a big part of all of the reporting efforts so far. And then key to this discussion is that that legislation and those statutes call for reevaluating, updating the sea level rise vulnerability and adaptation report every 5 years. So we would, with that, be approaching a 10-year mark in December 2027. So we're taking that as an opportunity, let's call it, though maybe not having the funding to really do, quite the scope of what we did in 2017, at least this point, to again have another look at what is the latest science telling us. There's been so much great work that's gone on in the 5 and even in 10 years since the initial report, pulling that in from the university, from other agencies, and from the agency we want to talk about as well, pulling that into the report, really making this a cooperative effort. Okay, next slide. So we've had some initial discussions. Again, it's been mostly a small hui of folks at the university, and the university, as you heard and you're aware, has been really involved in the development of the reports and the viewers. So we had some initial talks about what could be contained in this report, especially if it's a collaborative effort. What can we pull into this? We want to look back again at the science. What's the latest science saying since the 2022 report and the 2017 report? What are the impacts we're seeing? We've spent a lot of time on this in both the reports, but the impacts are only growing. Examples like this: erosion to our highways, homes, resort areas, flooding is only increasing in our coastal communities. So telling some of those stories, local examples, and the implications for adaptation planning. we really feel we'd like to go deeper into the socioeconomic ramifications of sea level rise. That is part of the initial charge of that statute you saw. There's been a lot of really important work in that topic at the university through folks like the Institute for Sustainability and Resilience. Want to do another progress check again, which was a big focus of the 2022 report. What has happened legislation-wise, planning-wise, policy-wise in the last 5+ years, and then leading to recommendations and really making this an action-oriented planning to the degree that we can. All right, thanks. Yeah. Okay, pass it to you.
Yeah, so before Brad talks about some questions for the commission about what this new report will look like, just wanted to go back real quick. We're not going to go through these, but just a reminder that in 2022, we used this very qualitative metric of trying to make a description of how far along we were in meeting each of the recommendations and the recommended action items underneath each of those. And then also added 2 new recommendations to basically do a full update in 2027, which is what we're here talking about now. Also included in that recommendation underneath was looking at vulnerability. The 2017 report really looked at exposure and labeled that as vulnerability, but looking at vulnerability as both the exposure to the hazard and adaptive capacity, which I think you'll hear some from Chris about coming up shortly. So we're at the halfway point right now, about 18 months or 2.5 years, I mean, since the 2022 update, 2.5 years to go until the 2027 update. So rather than waiting until we're close and gathering all of the great work that all of the different agencies have been doing across the state and counties, we'd like to reach out now to have folks start to report on those. So Leah, if you could go to the next slide. So towards that end, we have created a simple form for folks to fill out, and the link to this will be promulgated out. I realize that the people in this room are very likely not the folks who are going to be filling out the form, but I thought we could just show you really quickly how it works. So if you click on that, Leah, it should go to the actual form.
Now I have to share.
It's okay. Okay. We don't have to do that. So okay. This was just a screen grab, but
should be there.
Okay. So as with all forms, the little start things are required, right? But it's been set up to auto-populate. So once you put in those initial information and then importantly, the actual action that the agency has taken or is in the process of undertaking because things may not be completed by then it gives you the option to choose the recommended area of focus. If you recall the 2022 report, we went through and identified areas of unmet need, which were for focus in this time frame between 2022 and 2027. As you choose those areas of focus, just pick a random one if you don't mind, Leah. What will come up underneath of it is the recommendations that were affiliated with it. So we'll auto-populate it. If by chance as you're doing that, you don't see something, you thought you picked the right area of focus, but it doesn't show you the recommendation, if you click on the other or unsure at the bottom, it will bring up the full list of recommendations.
Great.
And then this is a required thing to help us to sort things. But then again, if you just randomly choose one of those, Leah. Underneath that are the recommended action items, and this is not required, right? So if a person is going through it and they just want to do it quickly and they don't want to assign it to an action item, that's fine. The next most important part, if you want to just keep scrolling down, is to put in why you're doing this, right? What's the expected or observed outcome? Oh yeah, on that one you can choose multiples. And then any comments you want. Then if you had many things that your agency has done, you can click yes, and you'll get the opportunity to add another one up to 5 times when you submit it. And if you have more than 5, because you are a very forward leaning, then you can just start another form again. So we just set the limit on this one to 5 items. And then this will just give us a way to collect all of this without multiple emails to everyone's inboxes reminding you to please tell us what it is that you've done. And by putting in the point of contact name and email information, also to give us the opportunity to get more information if we need to. You or your designees can open this up as many times as you want. You could do, you've got it on your list to do and you have 10 things, but you only get to one in a day. Go ahead and submit that because there's no way to save it. And then you can just open it up again in the future. So this is just designed to try to help make it easy for everyone, that as it comes to your mind to put some information in, and we can maybe have a more systematic and ongoing way of collecting these agency actions that will let us have some more ability to look at the metrics and something a little more quantitative for the 2027 report.
Made it easy for us.
The hopes.
Okay.
Back to Brad.
Thanks, Amy. Yes, so from some of our initial discussions, kind of landed on a number of key objectives, and we'll be interested to hear from you all if you have other ideas here too, or if you agree with these. But with this 2027 update, we really want to try to make the report implementation focused, really catalyze action. There's been a lot of focus on the science and what that means. We need to still do that, but let's make this action focused. We continually have to make this work for a broad audience. That's true for the reports and especially the sea level rise viewers so far. I mean, folks that's interested public, the concerned public, all the way up to really high-end planners and users of the data. So it's a challenge and an opportunity. They're making this work kind of for everybody. This information we're putting out. We talked about the style of the report. The initial 2017 report was a thick PDF report. Maybe we don't want to go that way this time. Maybe this is more of a web-based report, a little more user-friendly that way. We can, again, discuss all this as we move through this in the coming year plus. But it also, we think it would be beneficial to have something for policymakers, a summary document, and relate that to policy. Certainly the need to weave in Hawaiian and place-based knowledge in this, along with the academic science, planning information. We need to expand our input, buy-in from state and county agencies. That's a big part of the reason we're here to talk to you all today. And then this is really central to the way we think we need to approach this, given that we don't have a lot of money to do this effort. It's really going to need to be a collaborative effort with some central coordination from Sea Grant, as Michael mentioned, but going to need writing and technical input from multiple entities at the university and our agency friends as well. Really need to hope to incorporate and leverage the existing tools, resources that are already out there, the many great reports that have been done by different agencies, and pull that into the report. Yeah. Okay, next slide. We do have some initial commitments. This is nothing absolutely solid. I'll just call this kind of a coalition of the willing so far. We do really want to expand this. We have, DLNR, Office of Planning Sustainable Development, beginning with the chairs, I hope.
Yes, of course. We have to set the model and encourage others, right?
Yeah. From the university, again, Hawaii Sea Grant, through our longstanding partnership with DLNR, ready to kind of serve that coordination role. We have the Coastal Research Collaborative, which is Dr. Chip Fletcher's team. Their research has gone on all through the state sea level rise reports. And so we want to try to pull in all the great science they're continuing to do, the modeling and the mapping they're doing. And then we've also been talking to the Institute for Sustainability and Resilience, McKenna Kaufman, Katie Loeb, others there. They've spoken here to this commission. A lot of their work around things like the socioeconomic ramifications of sea level rise. The surveys they're doing around perceptions and needs around sea level rise information with government and elected officials. And then other groups like the Pacific RISA, which is a NOAA Climate Adaptation Partnership through the East-West Center, has done a lot of work around like national climate assessment. They do a lot of science outreach around the Pacific Islands too. So they're interested in helping us out as well, it sounds like. Okay, we have left. Oh, all right. So I'll defer the chairs on this, but if we have time, maybe some questions and discussions. There's just a couple prompts here. not everybody has to feel the need to answer this, I think, but maybe just food for thought if you want to
Sure.
address this, or if there's other things you want to talk about with our
Okay.
time left here.
Thank you, Brad and Amy.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and encourage comments from anyone. Are there, let's start with this. Are there, do you see gaps that are missing in this proposal that you feel would be important for our 10-year update of our sea level rise adaptation study, vulnerability and adaptation report? Representative Lowen, any thoughts?
Not specific, I have other questions that will, but
Okay.
if people have thoughts specific to the presentation.
All
I'll
right.
take those first.
Senator Lee, are you still there?
No.
No, okay. All right, any of the members, any other members that have thoughts on, we'll broaden it out, not just gaps, but areas that you particularly want to see included? Nancy, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate the inclusion of native wine and place-based knowledge. I think that marrying Indigenous science and Western science is becoming a hugely powerful thing that's emerging in a lot of different fields, but especially in this one. And so I think DHHL could definitely play a role in helping get some of our cultural practitioners and our folks, our beneficiaries who live on the shoreline to give their input and their mana'o and their ike. So I think we'd be really happy to help coordinate that and help you guys out.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Other members?
Are you weaving some maps in for like fire, fire vulnerability areas? Is that part of this at all? Like, and I know that this is
Wildfire risk.
Yeah, wildfire risk and things like that.
I think this is sea level.
Yeah, but I mean, I realize that, yeah.
There's definitely other efforts
Yeah,
around
okay.
that. Yeah, we can think about the intersection of those
Yeah.
issues, maybe we're talking about, because that is coming up in
Right.
line with the building.
Yeah. I mean, we at DLNR are really looking at Mauka to Makai.
Mhm.
So what happens on the Mauka has a definite impact to the Makai. And so if we're not making, water resources flow
Mhm.
all throughout, it does have both impacts to near shores and not necessarily sea level rise, but I mean, I think looking at things in a more holistic way rather than in isolation, I think that is a helpful tool, I think, that we're finding. And it would be helpful having access to all of the different kinds of resources that may be available to address climate action in a more holistic way. Yeah.
So if I can comment, there's two different initiatives. One, CZM had worked on kind of like a sea level rise
Mhm.
vulnerability kind of assessment.
And which we'll hear from next.
A little different. I think it's social vulnerabilities.
Uh-huh.
So it looks at other aspects and different pieces, not quite wildfire. But I think it does start to kind of bridge the gap between those two, and that's going to be maybe incorporated a little bit more.
Okay.
We've talked about incorporating that on a sea level rise viewer map. But also McKenna Kaufman and her team are also looking at building out the social vulnerability index that the commission had initially brought together to identify the different layers. So they're actually trying to map that out. So I believe, I need to check in with her, but I believe it is looking at multiple different impacts of
Okay.
sea level rise
That's
as well as wildfire.
Okay.
So I'll check in on that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other thoughts on this, I want to thank Brad and Amy and UH for, and Michael, especially Michael, for helping the commission meet its statutory requirement, which is going to be really helpful in looking at what kinds of adaptations and mitigations are needed going forward. Let's move on to.
Rev Lowen had some questions.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
it's like just peripherally related, but the Slorexa tool, is that at risk? Because I think I heard something about that being partially federally funded or some of the positions or maintenance of it. Is that, what's going on with that and how much do we need to look at supporting it? Because I know there's been legislation passed subsequently based on the data that's contained in that, so it's important that it's maintained.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. The sea level rise, state sea level rise viewer was initially developed with some federal NOAA funding in part. It is hosted by Pacific Islands Ocean Observing System, PAC-IUS, on their website, which is a federal partnership with the university. All that being said, I haven't heard any concerns about direct risk to that program.
Okay.
I would defer to their leadership on that. I mean, it's we're actually in touch with them right now about some possible updates to sea level rise viewer. So I know that's not your direct question, but we do want to see the sea level rise viewer live on through this 2027 update. There's a lot of great science coming online from Dr. Fletcher's research team, and may not be quite ready for statewide release of all their data by the end date for this report. So we want to do everything we can to make sure that viewer stays online and alive. Yeah.
Okay, well, if they're, let us know, I guess, if there's funding issues that arise to all the federal funding cuts.
Thank you.
Good point. Thank you.
Ben?
Okay, are we ready?
Yeah, Ben.
Ben.
I apologize. I had a similar question and just wanted to ask if I may, whether there's been a conversation that has to take place about funding for the actual report, because it was indicated that there is some funding, but like, what is the whole picture? And I don't obviously have an answer, but I just figured it would be useful for us to say it out loud.
Yeah. The 2017 report was that line item funded to DLNR by the legislature without, but the ongoing was an unfunded mandate, right?
How
So
much
there's-
was that? Do you remember? Michael, do you remember?
Yeah, I have the bill here.
Just, yeah, how much do you need for this one?
How much do you have?
Yeah. Fair
That's
question.
not coming back. So we don't know, partly because we don't know
The
full
scope?
scope
Okay.
or the process. But given that you are doing quarterly meetings,
Yeah,
I'm confident that by October,
okay,
we'll have an idea and we'll
Great.
continue to consult with people with what we hope to accomplish.
okay.
And that will lead to funding, and that will tie nicely into the next legislative cycle if needed.
Okay, that'd be
Is that
helpful.
Fair enough?
Okay, yeah,
So I
no,
don't
that's,
know how much we need.
yeah, no, that's helpful, because to a certain extent, I don't want the funding to drive the scope, but it may end up doing that, right?
Right.
If you don't have enough. So, yeah, I mean, come into us with your, what, to have a really effective report and a comprehensive one. What is it that you need? And I'm sure we will try to figure it out with Rep. Lowen's help.
Thank you.
And Rep. Passion, he was still here too, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, members, let's move on. I'm going to ask Chris Leo to introduce the next item. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, co-chairs. So this is a sea level rise vulnerability tool that was a part of Act 178. So it was a charge from the legislature that came with funding, which is always appreciated. And that allowed us to bring on a consultant team through ICF. And this actually started prior to my arrival. So had to Mary Alice for supporting some of the CZM team as they worked on this effort. So it's probably going to be a bit of a hybrid presentation here because we have Sarah Chang, who was the project lead for our staff on Zoom here. We've got Kenzie, and then I think we have some folks from the consultant team as well. So however you folks want to start, by all means, there's chairs up here. So
Yeah, come on out.
come on up.
So since Sarah is the lead on this, why don't we let Sarah lead off and then turn it over to members of your team as appropriate. Go ahead, Sarah.
Great. Hi, can you all hear me okay?
You're muted.
Oh, I think we caught a little bit. Try to say something else, Sarah.
Testing, testing.
Yeah, it's just a little delayed, so.
Okay. Well, I might try and just go with it, and if it's a problem, let me know and I'll try to fix it. Does that sound okay?
it's going good.
Okay, great. So aloha chairs and commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to share this vulnerability assessment tool with you. Apologies, I'm getting over a cold and I didn't want to spread anything, so I'm zooming in today. But my name is Sarah Chang. I am a project analyst with the CCM program within Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. And we are kind of soft launching the sea level rise vulnerability assessment tool that is intended to be available to state agencies to help them assess the vulnerability of their state facilities to sea level rise. And, you know, hopefully can use that information to prioritize the vulnerabilities of their facilities within their own asset portfolios and perhaps help to inform some CIP requests and where to prioritize, you know, the limited funding that everyone has. I think next slide, please. Okay, and I think we can actually just go to the next one. So this initiative, as Chris mentioned, really stems from the 2021 legislative session, which mandated OPSD in coordination with state agencies to identify state-managed facilities that are vulnerable to sea level rise. So since 2021, I'm just going to highlight some of the key accomplishments that we've done so far. The first thing was we created what we call our Act 178 action team, which is made up of representatives from agencies with facilities management responsibilities. And this action team has come together multiple times throughout the course of this project to help provide information, guide the direction of the initiative, and they've also been available for more one-on-one conversations. So it's been really helpful to make sure that all the different agency perspectives are included. In 2021, we also conducted an initial inventory of all of our state facilities and then ran that through a very basic sea level rise exposure assessment just to see whether or not a facility was located inside or outside of the sea level rise exposure area or NOAA's 6-foot passive flooding projection. In 2022, we conducted a literature review to get a better understanding of the mechanisms that other coastal states and municipalities were using to assess vulnerability to sea level rise. And that really informed kind of where we went with this initiative. And so one of the things that we found was that there's kind of this spectrum of broad guidance documents to very specific standardized forms for assessing vulnerability. And we felt that we already have in Hawaii a lot of really great guidance documents. And so we were, with the feedback from the action team, really focused in on developing a more standardized sea level rise vulnerability assessment approach, with the hope that having kind of a standardized process and template could encourage alignment of efforts across across and within state agencies. And then in the long term, potentially seeing this assessment as something that could support documentation for CIP funding requests. So in 2023, kind of with that goal in mind, we requested funding from the legislature, which we were very lucky and happy to receive. And in 2024, use that state funding to begin our contract with ICF, who will kind of dig into the meat and potatoes of the tool itself. And we're hoping to have that completed and released and available to all of our state agencies later this year. Next slide, please. So before getting into the assessment tool itself, I guess I want to put this kind of in the context of a larger planning process. The early stages of this project included a lot of discussions with action team members and one-on-one discussions with public works and facilities management folks in agencies that have kind of make up the larger percentage of facilities within their portfolios. And from those discussions, we heard kind of three main things. There's a need for comprehensive and clear sea level rise guidance. Interdepartmental collaboration for sea level rise adaptation planning is going to be critical, and that there are challenges with sea level rise adaptation funding and capacity constraints. So we tried to address, thinking about how to address those challenges in this tool that we were creating. And the team developed this wave model to visualize all the various aspects and phases of the adaptation process. So you can see it starts with the circle number 1, starting with screening, going into assessment, prioritization of needs, planning and design of adaptation options, implementation of those options. And then since our understanding of vulnerability and adaptation will be changing over time as new data becomes available, we wanted this to be an iterative process. So hence the kind of ongoing cycle. And so the hope is that this model really lays out a systematic process for evaluating and prioritizing risks and adaptation to improve state facilities' resiliency to sea level rise. So the vulnerability assessment tool, or the VAT, and we are open to suggestions for catchier names, but the VAT really seeks to address the first 4 phases in this planning process, the ones in red here: screening, assessment, prioritization, and planning. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to the ICF team in the room to talk a little bit about the tool itself.
All right, I'm up next. Susan Assam with ICF. I lead our climate planning team. Have been working on climate change for 25 years. Really glad that we're at the point where we're developing assessment tools and really getting them in the hand of agencies. Because decades ago, we were kind of trying to convince people they should be concerned. So if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to talk about the tool a little bit in terms of conceptually, what were we trying to accomplish? And then Hannah, my colleague, is going to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of it. So we really wanted this to be something that was easy for people to use. As Sarah was mentioning, we talked to agencies early on to really understand their needs. And we just recently went back out to the agencies and we kind of showed them what we developed and actually got a fairly enthusiastic response. So I think that our attempt to make something that was approachable and valuable to them seems to be hitting the mark thus far. But we really wanted to be taking the information that's already out there, making sure we're getting it into the hands of the people that need it, in a way, again, that's very approachable. And therefore, we created a form as well, similar to the form that we were just seeing. That's just a Microsoft form, so that people could really easily just go in and, similar to the form we saw earlier, you answer a question, and then depending on the answer, it kind of flows down to like what are the subsequent questions that you need to answer. And all of it, the goal is to help agencies to look at their building portfolio's vulnerability. So building by building, to be looking at whether or not it's exposed to sea level rise. And then if it is, to be asking questions to understand its vulnerability. And really to come out after they've gone through building by building with a list of which of those buildings are vulnerable, that need more attention, that we need to be thinking about in terms of adaptation strategy. And it does have a user guide that is a companion that allows them to get information about just, how do they take those next steps. So the form is really meant to help guide them through, how do I understand which of these buildings are vulnerable to sea level rise? And then the companion guidance is to help them, what do I do with that? Where do I go from there? So next slide might cover some of what I was just saying as well. So here it is, just in terms of what our goals were in terms of creating this tool, and really making sure that we were also using data in a way that could be easily updated. So linking to existing, amazing state resources that we already have, rather than us trying to bake it into the tool, which would immediately leave us with something that was outdated. And really trying to make something that once people are interacting with this form, the outputs can also feed back to OPSD, right? So that Sarah and team can really understand and get that data from across all the agencies and do a look across the agencies statewide, you know, what are we seeing in terms of the buildings and the vulnerability? So I think I'll leave it there, and I probably stole some of Hannah's thunder.
No, thanks, Susan, for providing that methodology. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Thompson. I'm a climate change and sustainability manager with ICF, and I've been working on this project with OPSD for the past year now. I'm going to take us through the nuts and bolts of the tool and go through the different components that end up giving us the results of the vulnerability of the different state agency buildings. Next slide, please. So when we started, we decided that there were 3 components of a building's vulnerability. That's the exposure, or the nature and degree to which a building is exposed to sea level rise, the sensitivity, and that's the degree to which it's affected by sea level rise, and then finally the adaptive capacity, and that's the ability of the building to adjust or cope with sea level rise and coastal flooding events. These 3 components make up a building's overall vulnerability. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the tool's logic model. So it starts with a rapid screening, and when users go through this, they'll determine whether or not a building is exposed to sea level rise or not, using the sea level rise viewer tool. Like Susan said, we have links to this within the form itself, and so as the tool is updated, the tool that we have is adapted to that as well, so it doesn't become stale. Once the user determines that the building is exposed, they'll then go into the overall vulnerability assessment process. So that consists of 5 stages. The first 3 sections, the exposure assessment, the sensitivity analysis, and the adaptive capacity assessment, give us the building's overall vulnerability score. Once that vulnerability score is determined, it's multiplied by a criticality factor. That criticality factor is determined based on a number of different qualifications that a building might have, its functions for society, and that is then multiplied with the output of the vulnerability score to give us the overall adaptation priority score. Finally, within the 5th section, and I can talk about this a little bit more later, it's a qualitative section about information to support agencies with prioritizing their buildings and adaptation measures. So, as I was saying, we have the 3 components of vulnerability, and within those 3 components, we have different factors that we're weighing to determine that vulnerability score. So for exposure, we're looking at coastal flooding history, inundation depth, and the distance to coastline. For sensitivity, this is really looking at the building's physical aspects, so damage level, other system dependencies, and then building condition and age. And then finally, adaptive capacity, looking at whether or not there are flood resilient design principles integrated into that building. Adaptation measures, this can be engineered or soft adaptation measures. Functional redundancy, looking at whether or not if there's a building nearby that can serve a similar purpose. And then finally, cascading impacts. So all of these 3 things go into making the vulnerability score. You're okay, Leah. We can go to the next slide. This is just a rehash of what I was talking about, making it a little bit easier to show the process, where the connections are. And then for the additional considerations, we added qualitative aspects such as equity and social vulnerability, funding access, compounding hazards, and other adaptation needs. So once a user goes through and puts all these inputs into the tool, it will pop out with a score that will help buildings and building managers and agencies themselves to look across their portfolio and see where their most vulnerable assets are. Next slide, please. And this will be collected within a spreadsheet that automatically updates as responses are submitted. So they can see the buildings with the highest vulnerability. We'll have all the raw data for each component and each factor of vulnerability, and that will automatically be multiplied by the criticality factor. On the screen, it is showing hypothetical building results. So in this scenario, the red building is the most vulnerable in the portfolio with a total score of 22.5. However, we'll see that actually the building vulnerability score is lower than blue building, but because it's a critical facility, that moves the prioritization of red building higher than blue building. Other really cool things about this are that the different scores for exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity can give us some insight into what to do to adapt and protect these buildings in the future to make them more resilient. So for example, although the yellow building is least vulnerable, out of all the buildings in that portfolio, it has the highest sensitivity. So that means if there is a flooding event that happens, that building will maybe incur more damage than its counterparts. In addition, red building has a very high exposure score, and so that's what's driving a lot of its vulnerability to sea level rise and coastal flooding. We're really hoping that this can be a tool for state agencies to use in order to prioritize their buildings. And we are developing additional guidance for thinking about adaptation pathways as well, in the face of funding shortfalls and other considerations.
Okay. Have you actually applied it to a building?
We have, yes. We've gone through various examples with different state agencies that have chosen example buildings. And while we don't have all the data that maybe a building manager would have, we've been able to like go and walk through the steps with them so far.
And this is only state buildings?
These are state buildings,
State-owned buildings or just?
Well, I could see where the tool could be used on non-state buildings because it's broad enough, but the funding came from the legislature, thank you. And the focus the legislators wanted to have was which state facilities are, most vulnerable and may, they want that information so that if a state agency says, please give us a capital improvement project appropriation to adapt this building, they want to see where it falls on the vulnerable and critical area so that the legislature can appropriate limited funds in the smartest possible way. Can you tell me give me some examples of criticality?
A critical building would be one that, like, for example, a hospital. The legislature has come up, the state capitol has come up as a critical facility because that's how laws and governing happens.
Right.
And so criticality can depend based on how an agency defines its own criticality of like how will we function if we lose this building. But we've provided guidance to help determine what criticality means for each agency.
Okay. Members, go ahead.
Well, I think what Mary Alice was getting at though is just like we want sort of more concrete, what's the outcome of the, so you've created a tool, great, but now like what are the results of plugging the data into that?
Well, the agencies are gonna be using the tool, so it hasn't been rolled out to them yet. It's been sort of shown to them, but they haven't used it yet, but then once they use it, then they'll have.
But you must have some
results.
idea, having worked on it or run it through some test runs, like which are the most critical, which, I think the idea was to identify which infrastructure is most at risk and if we need to work on adaptation, whether it's to structure or relocation, where should funds be focused? So what facilities are those, or infrastructure, if it's something like roads or something else.
Sarah, did you want to answer that question?
Or I think I heard it. Yeah, since we have not rolled it out widely, I don't know if we can answer that question. I think the piloting that we've done with agencies so far has been almost more to just test the tool itself and make sure that the questions make sense and the flow and language is, understood by whoever might be filling out the tool. So we hope to have the tool launched, I think by the end of the fall of this year. And so hopefully we'll be able to have a better understanding of, which of those facilities are most vulnerable once the agencies start actually implementing the tool. I hope that answered the question.
I mean, it helps me understand there's no sort of tangible result yet, but I guess, yeah, we'll see.
Are there a whole bunch of disclaimers to this? I mean, this is almost like a flood map. I mean, so if the building is vulnerable and no actions are taken and somebody gets flooded, I don't know. Just thinking about it.
Well, I think, so thank you for involving DHHL and seeing the tool and kind of testing it out. I think it's about risk management, a lot of it. And I guess one of the concerns we had was our portfolio doesn't just include structures or buildings, it includes infrastructure like water systems. And so, in order to get a complete picture, my understanding was this was initially just about buildings. And I'm not even sure we gave you guys a list of all the buildings we have. So, but has there been any discussion about is additional funding needed to include infrastructure, or what are some kind of next steps to kind of give us a more complete picture for state agencies?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Nancy. Yeah, so this originally the act was written to say state managed facilities. And at that time it was unfunded. And so just due to the capacity we had internally, we had to limit the scope to be focused on buildings. So we took that as state managed buildings. But the tool itself is designed in kind of a modular format that it could be added to and updated in the future. And I think that was part of the intention, because another piece of the act was that while the threat that we were assessing was primarily sea level rise, the act also mentioned flooding and other natural hazards. And so we wanted to have that kind of opening to be able to adapt this tool in the future when additional funding comes available to address other types of vulnerabilities, perhaps other types of infrastructure as well. So we're hoping that the way the tool is designed allows for that future improvements.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the members? And then we'll ask for comments from the general public.
I have just a question, because I know Ben, city and county are working on something like, but more broadly. I was wondering if this was enough to kind of share similarities or what else?
So we're in the midst of launching what's called the climate change design guidelines. And this one is focused less on an existing portfolio of buildings and how to assess their vulnerability, and more focused on any capital investments we make and what design considerations we should take in order to make those buildings future-proof or appropriately responsive to the understood climate impacts. And so it's similar in that it assesses all climate impacts. So it takes the building and then says, here's the relevant data for heat, here's the relevant data for sea level rise, here's the relevant data for flooding, this kind of thing. And then it puts those on the table as design criteria. And then from there's a bunch of recommended actions that design teams can take, but it is purely guidance and it's not regulatory. So happy to share it at a future meeting if it's appropriate. I think Mary Alice, we gave you guys a little taste of it earlier on, but it's going into implementation, exciting. And the last thing I'll say is that I think where this gets tricky and where I could see it'd be difficult to just give a list is that the criticality and the jurisdiction kind of interweave. So when, like, for example, HDOT has highways, harbors, and airports, and they have to be there in that room to talk about the critical aspects of that, because it's not just an objective assessment. They're the ones that know how the thing works. And then you have to put that information in order to get out real information. And that's one of the things we're learning in One Water, which is to say, like, we have agencies that have historically just operated on their own because you just build a thing and you forget about it and then you fix it when it's broken. And now we're saying, well, there's a sequence and everybody has to go together because we can only afford to, this thing isn't gonna be here in 40 years. So how do we think about that, and I'm scratching the surface, but I'm sure these guys have thought about it in depth and as have a lot of us. So that's, I'll stop here, but that's the area that I think that this CCMAC could really be powerful, is helping us do that cross-jurisdictional coordination and making sure we understand each other's needs relative to sequencing, relative to decisions about stay or go in an area, or like what piece of infrastructure leads and what's gonna happen.
Yeah, and I would just add to your point, Ben, that again, why we're asking the agencies to engage in this and to fill out the form and to have these conversations is because they're so critical. And we could just do a data analysis, right, with given data of what's vulnerable. But the aspect of criticality and really getting the building managers to weigh in, not just based on what's their asset data sets, always, not just the state, anywhere we work, asset management is always lacking. And yet if you pull in a building manager, they know, right? And they're gonna remember, and it's so valuable. So by having them really engage in this form, we're gonna get really great data. We just don't have it yet because we haven't launched the tool. But I think it'll, I think, allow us to continue to have these conversations and even open the form again and revise, based on some of the cross departmental conversations. And even, we did meet with Alex and on Ben's team, and we're talking about the complementarity between the state and the city and county and what is happening, because I think that the efforts are complementary, not contradictory.
Have you used this tool elsewhere?
No, we
Oh,
built
this,
it. We're
okay,
just-
this is just designed for here.
Yeah.
Okay, members of the general public, any thoughts? If not, we're going to move on to our executive director's report, and then we'll wrap up by 3. Okay, Leah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you all. First, I just want to apologize to everybody who is joining us early on in the meeting for the confusion with the Teams/Zoom thing, but thank you for bearing with us and joining us and making it here. I'll be relatively quick if I can figure out how to, whoa.
There we go.
This is
That was quick.
It's not particularly useful. All right, so first thing, we have a first draft of our climate action pathways. Is pretty down to the wire there, trying to get all these pieces together. We have about 24 recommendations that we have sub-recommendations for that will be open to public comment in early August. We're trying to put it on a platform called consider.it that will help us get really robust feedback. So our plan is to open it August, September for public comment. We're hoping to, do a little bit of a road show, share out kind of the key messaging from the climate action pathways, and really do want this to be an opportunity, not just, an exercise of commenting, but really an opportunity for us to revise and amend and have this reflect both what we want to be seeing as well as, what is happening now within the state. What was the other thing I wanted to say? Oh yeah, so one of the things that we're really wanting to make sure that we do is think about the equity pieces in this, the connection to all of the various work and breaking down silos in this. So while it was originally just focused on mitigation, we actually have been incorporating a lot of adaptation pieces in here too. I wouldn't say it's like a full holistic view on all the things, but I think it's a good first step for us to be looking forward to. We're hoping to have the final report ready for December so that we can look at those recommendations moving forward to the legislative session. It's a really good, important for folks to get feedback, and we'll definitely be sending that out to folks. We're going to be hosting a community climate resource fair at the Key Project in Kaneohe, August 28th. More info to come on that, but I'm really sharing it now if folks have capacity or messaging that they want to share with community members on any resources that you can help them with mitigation adaptation to climate change, any information you want to share, please get a hold of Bill here, or you can always contact me and I can connect you. I want to share, I spoke about this briefly about my meeting with the U.S. Climate Alliance. As you folks know, the Hawaii is a state of the, I think it's 23 states membership of the U.S. Climate Alliance. I went to the spring meeting and we talked about a lot of things, but really what it was is looking at, the first 100 days of this new federal administration and how the U.S. Climate Alliance was going to continue to work in it. For those that don't know, the Climate Alliance was established with the first Trump administration when there's the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. So a number of states came together and said, we're going to still be in and we're still going to address climate change. So we also were talking a lot about the Alliance's vision for the next 4 years, or until in the second half of this decisive decade, also known as the critical decade, and also how we're going to communicate climate messaging and communications, because it's a really delicate balance here, saying like, this is urgent, this is important, but also really recognizing all of the other impacts that folks are facing as affordability, health issues, and the various disasters that are happening, and how we can message the importance of keeping climate change in this conversation in a way that's relatable to folks that may not be really comfortable with that kind of scientific connection. Again, we were talking about the capacity in light of the federal disruptions. So as we've heard today, there's a lot of reduction in funding, reduction in staff, reduction in data. We're all going to really need to come together and hui up and work in a coordinated fashion in order to continue maintaining the data, updating the data, and supporting each other's work, because I think the resources are just becoming thinner and thinner. We also discussed, this is what I talked about before, this global leadership in climate without that federal support. The world really is looking to the U.S. Climate Alliance and leaders, states, California, New York, Washington, and Hawaii, as to what we're going to do about climate change. And so this is really just a really call to action for us as a leadership state to really hold the line and say climate change is still really important for us to be addressing. We recognize that it's a real and true danger, and this is what we're going to do about it. And so it's great to have that partnership with other states that have, significant resources and know that we have each other's backs. And then we also got a chance to speak with some staffers from Congress about, the work that they're still doing within Congress about climate change and all different various factions, and how we can continue to work with them, even with this leadership. We also have been having our climate equity hui meetings. One of the things, I think this is one of your questions, Chair, was about the LIDAC analysis and community characteristics. So this is really helping us define where we see vulnerable communities, how we define vulnerable communities, how we identify them, and how we can provide support. So I'll skip down to resilience hubs is kind of where we landed as one of the really important key messages and areas that we think that the Climate Commission can work with the other folks that are working on these resilience hubs to make sure that each community, and it really has to be each community, has access to these resilience hubs in the very multitude of forms that these can take. They can be microgrids, they can just be resource information centers, they can be shelters in wake of disasters, whatever, what have you, new buildings, refurbishing old buildings, co-working spaces, all of those things. So we really see in the discussions with the equity hui, we really saw that resilience hubs were an area where we can address the whole slew and list of things. There's like food distribution and community resource and technical assistance support that can all be provided in those. So how can we help to support those communities that might not have that leadership in those areas to build that leadership and that learn from other areas that have already kind of built out these systems. I think we learned a lot of lessons from Lahaina and how community came together and seeing if we can replicate that before the emergency happens. In that kind of same tone, we talked about managed retreat a lot and how the conversations really need to be starting. It's something that, you know, Brad and Amy and many of us in this room have talked about all the time, and these conversations need to be starting to have at the community level, and how we can start those conversations now, because we are going to have to face some pretty serious hard decisions going forward. So we've explored this in our adaptation pathways bills that have gone through the legislature a few years, and it's really trying to identify those key community members that we can start those conversations and start talking about how does the community see this happening, and you know, what are the realities and what are the options for as things come forward. And then also, you know, again, the funding opportunities and how limited they are right now and how we can leverage those resources as much as possible.
What does LIDEX stand for?
Low income disadvantaged AC. Yeah, yeah, something community. I don't know what the A is. Yeah, but
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's it.
Okay,
Perfect timing.
thank you, Leah.
Oh yeah, 3 on the
Appreciate
dot.
that.
I know.
Oh, we're 3:00.
Timing.
So I'm a great believer in Robert's rules. We don't have to have a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
So we are adjourned.
Hello, everyone online.